Before Spider-Verse, animation had one direction. More realistic, smoother, cleaner. Every studio was chasing the same thing. Then one film came out that looked hand-printed, choppy, and deliberately imperfect, and instead of failing, it changed everything. Every animated film since that actually took a risk traces back to that moment. Hey, I'm Mac. Welcome to Scene Shift. At this point, I have mentioned Spider-Verse too many times on this channel. I have brought it up in multiple videos where I said that in 2018, everything changed for animation, and it was Spider-Verse that made that change. So you can probably tell I was really excited to talk about this movie. So first, I want to give some context. I love comic books. I love when movies actually feel and behave like comic books. I also love animation, especially stylized animation where I get to see something new, something artistic, something that really shows the beauty of the medium. And then one more thing. Guess who my favorite Marvel superhero is?
Spider-Man does whatever a spider can.
It's Spider-Man. So from that alone, you can guess that Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse is one of my favorite movies of all time. I have wanted to talk about this movie for a long time, and if it were up to me, I could talk about this movie for hours, about how good it is and how it completely changed my perspective on animation, comic book movies, and everything I have watched since. You can even see that in my recent videos. In Puss in Boots, the style is clearly inspired by Spider-Verse. When I talked about Pixar, I mentioned how in 2018, when Spider-Verse came out, it was doing something new that Pixar was not doing at the time, and Pixar got criticized for staying focused on realism. So in this video, I'm going to talk about my love for Spider-Verse. But I don't want to stay on the surface, just talking about how it looks or how it changed animation. I want to go deeper and get into things that I don't see many people talking about. To understand how it changed everything in 2018, we have to understand what animated movies actually looked like before it. Toy Story came out in 1995. The first fully computer-animated feature film. And when people watched it, it felt like proof that computers could build worlds. The lesson studios took from that was simple. The future of animation was realism. The more a cartoon could look like real life, the better. The more a shirt had individual fabric fibers, the more a splash of water obeyed actual physics, the more a strand of hair caught light like a strand of hair actually would, the more perfect, the better. The thing about Pixar is that they never stopped pushing. It felt like every new release was a tech demo disguised as a masterpiece. I mean, look at the jump from the believable reflections in Cars to the individual hairs on Remy in Ratatouille. Then they hit us with Up, featuring rain on a screen. It looked like physics. People absolutely lost it. And honestly, can you blame them? The formula was bulletproof. Every major studio started building toward the same destination. DreamWorks, Sony, Blue Sky, Warner Animation, all of them chasing photorealism, softer edges, smoother movement, more believable skin. The goal was to make the audience forget they were watching something that didn't exist. And by the mid-2000s, they'd done it. I remember sitting in theaters around 2015, 2016, watching animated films and feeling like they all came out of the same machine. The lighting was the same, the way characters moved was the same, the way backgrounds breathed and blurred was the same. Some of these films had great stories, some I genuinely enjoyed, but they all looked identical. The industry had spent 20 years removing imperfection. Every grain, every stutter, every rough edge, eliminated. The goal was control over every rendered pixel, and they achieved it. Spider-Verse reintroduced imperfection on purpose. That turns out to be a very different creative philosophy. Something that gets glossed over in every Spider-Verse retrospective is that the movie almost didn't exist, and the reason it does exist is a cyber attack. In late 2014, Sony Pictures Entertainment got hacked, one of the biggest corporate data breaches in Hollywood history. Internal emails, financial documents, franchise strategy documents, all of it leaked to the public. And buried inside those leaks was a detailed picture of how desperate Sony was about Spider-Man. The Amazing Spider-Man 2 had just come out and underperformed badly enough that everything Sony had planned around it collapsed. The sequel that was supposed to launch a villain spin-off universe, a Sinister Six film, a female-led Carnage spin-off, a fourth Spider-Man movie, all of it gone in about 3 months. Critics tore it apart. The leaked emails showed executives debating everything. Should they sell the rights back to Marvel for somewhere between $1 and $5 billion? Should they reboot it with a different actor? Should they make a crossover movie with Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield, an idea some executive had projected could earn $2 billion? The studio was looking at every possible option. What eventually happened is something most people know. Sony and Marvel struck a deal. Tom Holland would play Peter Parker, he'd appear in Captain America: Civil War, and then headline his own Sony film, backed by Marvel's creative infrastructure. That deal left a gap. Sony still owned the Spider-Man 1P completely. They could do whatever they wanted with it in animation. And with the live-action situation handled, someone asked what a movie about Miles Morales could look like. In April 2015, Phil Lord and Christopher Miller signed on to produce. If you know their track record, Sony giving them this felt almost funny. Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs, a movie about food weather. 21 Jump Street, a remake of a forgotten cop show. The Lego Movie, literally a feature film built around plastic toys. Every single one of those should have been a cynical cash-in. Every single one turned into something people genuinely loved. Lord and Miller had spent a decade proving that the dumber a concept sounds on paper, the more interesting it becomes when you actually care about it.
My name is Jeff.
They had one condition. The movie would center Miles Morales, a biracial teenager from Brooklyn, half African-American, half Puerto Rican, who gets bitten by a radioactive spider in a world where Peter Parker already exists. Miles was the question the movie was built around. What does it mean to wear a mask that someone else already made famous? Before a director was even attached, a visual development artist named Alberto Mielgo was hired to figure out what this thing should look like. He was given a studio floor and months of relative isolation. His job was to break the pipeline, to find a visual language that had never been used in a feature film. Mielgo's work, his color choices, his extreme framing, his integration of street art into the environment became the foundation of the film's look. He was eventually let go before it finished, but his fingerprints are on every frame. The actual directing trio, Bob Persichetti, Peter Ramsey, and Rodney Rothman, inherited that visual foundation and pushed it further. The mandate from Lord and Miller was captured by VFX supervisor Danny Dimian in one line: "If it ain't broke, break it." Go into a working system and deliberately damage it. Find out what happens when you remove every rule animation had built over 20 years. And this is the thing people forget about that decision. It could have just looked broken. Choppy animation, weird dots, misaligned colors in a superhero movie from the studio that made the Emoji Movie 1 year earlier. There was no guarantee any of this would work. The whole project was a bet that audiences would adjust to something genuinely new. And historically, audiences don't always do that. What they built took 1 week to animate a single second of footage. Standard animation takes about a week for 4 seconds. The film deployed 177 animators at peak production, more than twice what a typical animated feature uses. Toy Story had 27. The total shot count was 2 to 3 times higher than any comparable animated film. They knew from the beginning this was going to be expensive, slow, and painful. They built it anyway. It doesn't feel like an animated movie. It feels like a literal comic book that just woke up and started moving. Most animated films still behave like movies. Spider-Verse makes a film that behaves like a printed page. The shadows aren't smooth gradients, they're lines. Cross-hatched lines, the way an artist's pen would build shadow. When something's in the background and out of focus, the colors don't blur. The cyan, magenta, and yellow layers split slightly instead, like a printing press that's just barely misaligned. You've seen this if you've ever held an old comic book up close. It's a printing error from cheap production, where the ink plates couldn't stay perfectly registered. Out of focus background? Don't blur it. Misalign it. Every other film in 2018 was trying to remove imperfections. This one was importing them deliberately. Watching it for the first time, it doesn't feel right immediately. The motion is choppy, the textures are strange, the edges are too sharp. Your brain is looking for the smooth Pixar motion it's been trained to expect for 20 years, and it's not finding it. But then around 15 or 20 minutes in, your brain adjusts, and suddenly this feels normal. And when you think back to how other animated movies move, they start to feel wrong instead. Too smooth, too perfect, a little dead. Spider-Verse trained you to see differently while you watched it. Okay, so this is the part that actually got me. I remember the first time I watched that forest swinging sequence. Miles and Peter in the same shot, same second of screen time. I paused it, played it again, paused it again. I was leaning so far forward toward my screen, I was basically off the couch. Something was different about how Miles moved, and I couldn't name it. And that inability to name it was what kept pulling me back. This is what I was seeing, and why it works. And it pays off in a specific way when we get to the leap of faith. Keep it in mind. Most people talk about Spider-Verse's animation like it's a coat of paint. Like the team drew some half-tone dots over a normal CG movie and called it done. The actual innovation is completely different. When you watch a movie, any movie, it's running at 24 frames per second. In modern CG animation, every single one of those 24 frames gets its own unique character pose. The computer calculates the exact position, the exact arc, the exact weight for every frame. This is called animating on ones. The result is really smooth, almost too smooth sometimes. Traditional hand-drawn animation cheated. They'd draw one pose and hold it for 2 frames. 12 unique drawings per second instead of 24. This is animating on 2s. The poses had to be more extreme, more punchy to compensate, crunchier, more expressive, a completely different kind of alive.
Early on, we realized that animating on 2s was going to be a great solution.
CG had abandoned this. Spider-Verse brought it back for a reason that comes from how comic books actually work. Your brain has to bridge the gap between panel A and panel B, filling in the movement between two frozen images. Animating on 2s does something similar. The movement feels like something you're partly constructing, not just receiving. Watch the sequence where Miles and Peter B. Parker are swinging through a snow-covered forest. Same shot, same second of screen time. Miles is animated on 2s. Peter is animated on 1s. Peter swings smoothly, effortless, the way someone who's done this for 15 years actually moves. Miles flails behind him, jerky, choppy, struggling in a way you don't just understand intellectually, you feel it watching him. The difference in animation rate makes it visceral in a way I didn't expect. The reason this is technically hard: standard physics simulations are designed to operate at 24 frames per second. When you hold a frame for 2 frames instead of 1, the simulation breaks. The studio had to write entirely new software to maintain Miles' choppy animation while everything around him stayed fluid. That clumsiness is tied directly to his shoelaces. The screenplay introduces Miles with an empty bag. He hasn't packed for his new school. He's singing along to a Post Malone song he doesn't quite know the words to yet. He trips on his laces trying to slap a sticker on a street sign. His dad uses the police cruiser PA system to announce to the street,
"I love you, Miles."
Yeah, I know, Dad.
You gotta say I love you back.
Dad, I love you.
That's a copy. Tie your shoes, please.
"Tie your shoes, please." At school, when a classmate points out they're a hazard,
His shoes untied.
Yeah, I'm aware. It's a choice.
the voice actor for Miles, Shameik Moore, recorded many of his lines while physically lying on the floor doing crunches, so his voice would crack and strain naturally. The choppy animation, the untied shoes, the strained voice. Every department built the same character from a different direction. Head of character animation Josh Beveridge put the whole philosophy in one sentence: don't emulate reality, and don't make it a cartoon. And then there are the smear frames, which are somehow even older than the frame rate trick. Instead of motion blur, for really fast movements, the animators just drew multiple limbs in a single frame. If you pause on Gwen playing the drums, you can actually see 4 or 5 hands and drumsticks occupying the same space at the exact same time. The earliest use of this is a 1942 short called The Dover Boys. Spider-Verse borrowed it, improved it, and put it in a $90 million feature film. The technique was 80 years old, and nobody in mainstream animation had touched it, because it looked wrong. That was the point. The motion of every character is showing you who they are and where they are emotionally before a single line of dialogue. That's what I couldn't figure out when I first watched it. And the motion is only half of it, because the image itself is doing something just as deliberate. Let's go there. The halftone dots covering every surface in Spider-Verse come from a printing technique called Ben-Day dots, invented in the 19th century as a way to save ink. You print a pattern of dots instead of a solid color. The eye blends them into a shade. Spider-Verse wrapped them around 3-dimensional geometry. The lighting team had to calculate how those dots move as characters rotate, tracking with the 3D model so the texture doesn't slide across the surface. All that complexity, all that mathematical work, just to make something look hand-printed, just to make it look cheap. The panelization takes this further. When the film wants to show multiple things happening at once, it divides the frame into comic panels. Web lines form the borders. Movie logic becomes comic logic. And then there's the text. When something hits in Spider-Verse, the sound doesn't just play through your speakers, it appears on screen. Thwip, boom, pow, as part of the world geometry. These words exist in the space, as real as the buildings. Stan Lee and Jack Kirby put those words on the page because they needed readers to feel the impact. Same with Kirby Crackle, the abstract dot clusters Kirby drew to represent raw energy. Spider-Verse uses them whenever the multiverse ruptures. His visual language repurposed as a functional tool. The 6 Spider People each get their own visual register. Miles operates in grounded Brooklyn realism. Peter B. Parker gets a more worn, faded look, colors less saturated, slightly more tired. Spider-Man Noir is black and white, actual black and white, existing inside a color film. The animators had to build detailed textures and shading for a character the audience can only perceive in grayscale. CG supervisor Michael Lasker called Noir the most technically challenging character to render. Penny Parker moves like she stepped out of a manga panel. Spider-Ham is Looney Tunes. He can produce a mallet from nowhere because that's the rule of his world. The visual language is the argument. Before anyone explains anything in dialogue, the film is already saying there is more than one way to be this. The mask fits more than one face, which means everything you've just seen in the visuals was already written down. Let's talk about how the screenplay itself was built, because that's where most people stop looking. Quick pause. If you're enjoying this breakdown, please hit like and subscribe. It helps the channel out a ton. Most people who love Spider-Verse talk about how it looks. Fewer people talk about how it was written. The screenplay itself was written in comic book language. Phil Lord and Rodney Rothman didn't write a standard film script and then hand it over for animation. The script literally opens with the instruction, "We begin on a comic." Throughout the text they write, a 3-panel split screen, quick cuts, jump cuts. The onomatopoeia that appears on screen in the film, bam, thwip, was capitalized directly in the action lines of the script. The visual language was written into the first draft. Every animator, every storyboard artist, every compositor was working from a document that already thought in panels. That means the film's visual identity was conceived as a visual object from the beginning. Now, the screenplay. And this is where I want to slow down, because there are a few things happening here that I genuinely don't see people talk about. Every superhero movie has a protagonist who eventually accepts their destiny. Spider-Verse is about something harder. Think about the insane pressure on Miles here. He isn't just taking on the mantle of Spider-Man, he's trying to fill the shoes of a legend who just died, while literally standing next to 5 alternate universe versions of that exact same hero. They've been doing this for years, they know exactly who they are, and to add insult to injury, they are actually animated smoother than he is. The film is structured around one question: is heroism a thing you inherit, or a thing you become? And it poses that question by giving Miles the worst version of the inheritance. His universe's Spider-Man is dead before Miles can learn from him. The multiverse drops a depressed, divorced, middle-aged Peter Parker in his lap.
Wait, and why is your body a different shape?
Pretty sure you just called me fat.
No.
And then it sets a clock. The interdimensional visitors are physically deteriorating. The collider is running. There's no time for a training montage. Phil Lord and Rodney Rothman knew what every person in the audience expected. They'd all seen the origin story, multiple times, 3 different live-action Peter Parkers across 20 years. So the script compresses the entire thing: the spider bite, the uncle dying, the great power speech.
With great power comes great responsibility.
With great power comes
Don't
great...
you dare finish that sentence. Don't do it.
Into a rapid montage recap, almost like a joke, because everyone already knows it. And here's where the script does something really smart. The smartest move you can make when your audience is already bored of something is to be bored of it alongside them. Every spider person who shows up does the same thing. Each one gets their own rapid-fire recap of their tragic backstory, delivered with exhausted humor, like they're slightly annoyed at having to explain this again. The recurring phrase,
All right, people, let's do this one last time.
"Let's do this one last time," runs through the film. It's a winking acknowledgement that the filmmakers know how tired audiences are of this origin story, and rather than ignore that fatigue, they make it the joke. They turn the audience's boredom into a bonding moment. Having characters summarize their own convoluted backstories with a kind of weary self-awareness disarms cynicism before it can form. You can't be bored by a Spider-Man origin when the film is bored by it alongside you. What you don't already know is Miles. The best character introductions show you everything before a word is spoken. Spider-Verse does this through his feet. The screenplay establishes his fear through his feet. Untied shoelaces in his first scene. His dad's voice booming out of the police cruiser speaker in front of Vision's Academy.
Tie your shoes, please.
Miles entering anyway, the camera panning up from his untied shoes. Miles clocking them. Miles choosing not to tie them. A classmate pointing out the hazard. Yeah, I'm aware. It's a choice. It's an act of defiance that's also an act of self-sabotage. He'd rather fall than conform. Whether that's brave or foolish, the film spends 90 minutes figuring out. He gets bitten, and things get worse. He can't control the stickiness, gets stuck to a girl's hair in class. He can't stop his own powers from making him a social hazard. The animation on twos makes all of this physical. His clumsiness is built into the software, not performed. The mathematics of his motion are wrong. That wrongness lives in his body before it lives in his head. Something I think is actually the most important point in the whole film. Miles doesn't become Spider-Man because he's special. He's not the best, he's not the strongest, he's not the most ready. The film goes out of its way to show you how not ready he is. He becomes Spider-Man because he chooses to try, at the moment when trying feels most impossible. Every other superhero origin is about destiny. This one is about decision. Into this walks Peter B. Parker. Miles needed a perfect mentor, someone who had figured it out. He got Peter B. Parker. The mentor in a good story is usually what the hero is supposed to become. This film figured out that showing the hero what they'll become if they get it wrong is more interesting. Peter B. Parker is that. Disheveled, overweight, sweatpants, openly describing his failed marriage and the choices that led to it. He knows all the Spider-Man conventions because he's lived them, and he's self-aware about them in a way that lets the script skip past any exposition and go straight to the meta-humor. He's been bitten by a radioactive spider. Yeah, his uncle died. He knows how this goes. In a way, Peter B. Parker is exactly the mirror Miles needed. Peter animates on ones. Peter is fluid and effortless. And Peter is a cautionary tale. Heroism without personal balance corrodes you over 15 years. The smoothness doesn't protect you from that. Worth noticing too, the film is funny, genuinely funny often, and that's doing real work. Spider-Verse is introducing a new visual language, a new protagonist, multiple alternate universes, and a villain with a grief-driven motivation all at once. That's a lot of weight to carry. The humor keeps the film from collapsing under it. Every time the complexity threatens to become overwhelming, a joke arrives and resets the audience's breathing. Spider-Ham is basically there because the movie desperately needs a release valve. The comedy is doing actual structural work to keep things from getting too dark. And you need that balance, especially when you look at Kingpin. The best villains are just the hero if one thing went differently. Same wound, different response. For Kingpin, tearing Brooklyn apart isn't the goal. It's just the insane price he's willing to pay to get his wife and son back. After his wife and son caught him at work and saw the monster he really was, they ran in a panic and died in a car crash. So now he's literally building a machine to tear a hole in the multiverse, all just to pull alternate versions of Vanessa and Richard into his reality. A grief engine. That's all it is. He's a man who built an impossible machine to solve an impossible problem because accepting the loss felt worse. You understand it. For half a second, you almost want it to work. The symmetry with Miles is tight. Miles pushes away his family out of fear of suffocating expectations. Kingpin tears the fabric of reality to reclaim family that fled from him. Miles has to learn to trust without control. Kingpin is destroyed by the belief that control can fix anything. The film proves that in the most specific way possible. When the collider activates and the multiverse cracks open, Kingpin actually gets what he wanted. Alternate versions of Vanessa and Richard materialize in front of him. For one moment, his machine does exactly what it was built to do. And then they see him. They watch him trying to murder Spider-Man, the same savage brutality that made the originals flee. And they do exactly what the originals did. They recoil. They run back into the collapsing multiverse. Kingpin loses his family again, in the same way, caused by the same flaw he never changed, in front of his own eyes. Kingpin defeats himself. His own nature, the one he couldn't change even when he had everything riding on it, is what undoes him. Kingpin's need for control destroys the one thing his need for control was trying to preserve. The physical fight almost doesn't matter after that. When Miles finally defeats him, he does it with the shoulder touch, a flirting technique his Uncle Aaron taught him in Act 1, a casual, slightly embarrassing piece of advice from a dead man. He uses it to deliver his bioelectric venom strike. The comedic setup from Act 1 becomes the key to saving the multiverse in Act 3. The all is lost moment comes before all of this. Miles webbed to the wall, left behind, having just watched his Uncle Aaron die. He asks the thing the whole film was building to.
When do I know I'm Spider-Man?
Peter's answer is the thesis of the movie.
You won't.
It's a leap of faith. You don't wait until you're ready. You decide, and then you fall. All of that setup, all of that motion on twos, all of those shoelaces, this is where it all lands. The directors knew the leap of faith sequence before they knew anything else about the movie. They started there, then built everything backward from it. Every shoelace, every stuck hand, every choppy frame of Miles on twos, every conversation about readiness. All of it reverse engineered to earn one image. Miles on the edge of a skyscraper, upside down relative to the city below him. Jefferson, his father, doesn't know Miles is Spider-Man. He's standing outside the dorm door. Miles is inside, webbed to the wall, having just watched his Uncle Aaron die. Jefferson talks through the door.
I see this spark in you. It's amazing. It's why I push you, but it's yours. Whatever you choose to do with it, you'll be great.
Miles breaks the webbing through a venom strike, the power that's been misfiring all movie, finally directed deliberately. He breaks free and climbs. He makes his own suit, black and red spray paint over the purchased suit, the symbol he puts on himself rather than inheriting. He climbs the skyscraper. At the top, the camera looks up at him from below. He's falling upward toward the city skyline, the world turning beneath him. And at that exact moment, his animation shifts. He stops being animated on 2s. He starts being animated on 1s. For the first time in the film, Miles Morales is running at 24 frames per second. The choppiness is gone. The wrongness that has been in his movement since his first scene, gone. He has matched the rhythm of the world. A mathematics problem with an emotional answer. The What's Up Danger sequence over this moment is engineered for it. The track builds from stillness to eruption. The bass drops sync to the fall. The moment he catches the web synced to the rhythm's resolution. Audio and animation and story converging on the same frame. When you build backward from the destination, this is what you get. There's one more layer to all of this that most people undervalue: the music. The music in Spider-Verse was never going to be an orchestra playing superhero themes. Miles Morales is a 16-year-old from Brooklyn, so the film built the soundtrack around what he'd actually listened to: a stacked roster of predominantly black artists, including Post Malone, Sway Lee, Vince Staples, Juice WRLD, Nicki Minaj, Amine, and Ski Mask the Slump God. Sunflower opens the film and plays through Miles' introduction. The script actually specifies that Miles doesn't quite know the words yet. He's singing a song he hasn't grown into, which is a pretty precise description of the whole character. He's performing an identity he doesn't fully fit yet.
Can I return it if it doesn't fit?
It always fits. Eventually.
The soundtrack is doing the same thing the animation is doing. Music Miles is listening to through headphones plays for the audience, too. We're in his auditory perspective. When the headphones get knocked off, the music cuts. The film keeps pulling us back into his subjectivity. Spider-Man Noir gets jazz. Film noir jazz. Spider-Gwen gets rock, heavy and driving, which tracks when you remember she's a drummer in a band. Penny Parker's scenes carry a completely different melodic register.
And we're best friends.
Each character gets their own visual language and their own sonic one. The music tells you who someone is before the script does. The end credits close with Elevate, an original rap track. No watered-down pop cover, no reprise of a familiar melody. Just a new piece of music that treats the audience like they have taste. And then the awards happened, and the industry had to decide what to do with all of this. For 6 consecutive years before Spider-Verse, Disney or Pixar won the Academy Award for Best Animated Picture. 6 years straight. Spider-Verse won in 2018. While Sony Pictures Animation was still widely considered a B-tier studio, the one that had made the Emoji Movie the previous year. The one no serious animation conversation centered on. That win was financial permission. Studio executives read it as data. Audiences will pay to see something different. Watching what happened next was actually kind of fascinating to me, because you could see which studios understood what Spider-Verse had actually done, and which ones just saw the surface. DreamWorks understood it. Puss in Boots: The Last Wish came out in 2022 and abandoned the look of every previous Shrek universe film. Simplified shapes, bold colors, a storybook illustration aesthetic, stepped frame rates during action sequences. The studio that built Shrek's swamp in exacting photorealistic mud textures made a film that looked like a moving painting. And it worked. The style served the story. A film about facing mortality that actually looked like it understood what mortality feels like. The same year brought The Bad Guys. Then, in 2023, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles: Mutant Mayhem, directed by Jeff Rowe, who had previously co-directed The Mitchells vs. the Machines for Sony. Mutant Mayhem looked like a high schooler's notebook came to life. Asymmetrical designs, scribble lines, intentionally rough. The cinematography mimicked handheld camera work instead of the mathematically perfect moves standard CG uses. Rowe credited Phil Lord's advice directly: never settle for clean if messy is truer. Then there was Disney. Disney used to be the studio that built new tools for specific films. In 1999, Tarzan used a technology called Deep Canvas, a program they built from scratch that let 3D camera movements exist inside hand-painted 2D environments. They invented a tool to serve the story they were telling. Their 100th anniversary film, Wish, tried to blend 2D watercolor heritage with modern 3D character animation. What came out got torn apart. You could see what it was: a flat shading filter applied over standard 3D models. The character proportions were still tangled, the movement was still frozen. Someone had applied a filter rather than built something from the ground up. Spider-Verse's visual style requires a ground-up pipeline rebuild. Disney had not done that, and everyone could tell. One more thing worth understanding about why this production model is so hard to replicate. Phil Lord and Chris Miller treated this animated film the way you'd treat a live-action film in the editing room. In live action, changing a camera angle or adjusting the lighting is relatively easy in post-production. In 3D animation, that means tearing down the entire render and starting over. Months of work potentially gone. The production ran over schedule and over budget because creative decisions that would be quick fixes in live action became catastrophic rework in animation. The studio had 177 animators at peak, more than twice the industry standard, partly just to absorb the constant changes. Animators worked under severe crunch for extended periods. The film's quality came with a real cost, one that doesn't get much attention in the success story. What I keep coming back to when I think about Spider-Verse is the untied shoelace. Not the multiverse, not the comic book dots, not the stepped animation. When Miles says it's a choice, choosing to stumble rather than conform, the entire film is in that moment. A 16-year-old refusing to tie his shoes so he can stay himself, even when everything around him is demanding he become something else. And then the film backs him up. It builds an animation pipeline around his wrongness. It makes the motion itself reflect his internal state. It lets him stay choppy and clumsy and on twos until the exact frame where he decides to fall, and then, only then, lets him be fluid. Every technical decision in this film is a story decision. Frame rate is character. Color misalignment is world building. A printing error is a depth of field choice. The animation's technical tools and storytelling tools were always the same tool. Spider-Verse just proved it. The film that changed the industry did it by listening to its character. Miles was clumsy and out of sync, so they made the animation clumsy and out of sync. They didn't fix him until he fixed himself, and that's why it works, because it doesn't force him to fit the world, it lets him change the rhythm of it. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this, hit subscribe and leave a like. It genuinely helps the channel more than most people realize. And if you want to see exactly how Puss in Boots: The Last Wish took everything Spider-Verse proved and pushed it even further, that video is right here. It's one of my favorites I've made. See you there.